Український кризовий медіа-центр продовжує.
Good afternoon. We are going to continue our work. And now we're going to start a briefing dedicated to the publication of the open statement of the journalists regarding the illegal detention by the so-called LPR of Maria Varfolomeieva, journalist. I would like to welcome the representatives of the leading mass media. I would like to invite here Andriy Kulikov, Громадське радіо, Oksana, Romaniuk, Institute of Mass Media, Dutsyk, Telekritika, Shevchenko, Institute of Media, right, Konstantin, Reutskyy, Skhid, Lesya Ganzha and Dostrup, pravdy, Internews-Ukraine, Matsuka, Radio Liberty, Andrievska, Independent Media, Trade Union of Ukraine, Vladimir, Yermolenko, Internews-Ukraine, Tatiana, Motychan, Week, Ruslan Kharchenko, TSN-Week, 1+1 TV channel, Anton, Krut, our center. They are going to tell us about what's going on in the east of Ukraine. Good afternoon. Actually, we are not only going to talk about the violation of the freedom of light on the occupied or annexed territories. We say that since those territories remain part of Ukraine, those people who work and live there and suffer there, they are Ukrainian citizens. Irrespective of what side of the front line they stay, we believe not only the words but the deeds regarding the freedom of right protection, freedom of speech on the Ukraine-controlled territories. And that's one question, in what way those territories are being controlled. But we decided that indeed we are going to start today from the case of Tatiana Varfolomeieva as the latest. I would like to say the last, but the circumstances do not allow me to say that. Let's say, putting the hindrances in the way of activities of journalists, in the violation of both the journalists and the civil rights. First, Konstantin, Reutskyy, and then we are going to continue. Good morning. Yes, indeed, the freedom of journalism suffers both on the controlled by Ukrainian government, frontline territories or adjacent to frontline. But I would like to talk today specifically about the rights of journalists on the occupied territories. First of all, in the Lugansk region, maybe my colleagues will say more about the Donetsk region territory, occupied territory. I would like to say that the free independent journalism on the occupied territories of Lugansk region has not been in existence since May last year. The militants did everything possible so that no information which would demonstrate their activities in the negative light, so to say, which is not favorable to them and their curators, then such information never leaves the territories they control. Independent media and the journalists per se was subjected to the, let's say, to repression on their part, many of our and persecution. Some of our journalists were physically assaulted, and some of them went through the tortures and imprisonment. And when I'm talking about the tortures, I'm talking about the very severe tortures. We can remember several cases since May last year when Vladimir Startsev, Vyacheslav Bondarenko, and Maxim Asovsky were illegally detained. All of them were charged, were accused of espionage in favor of the Ukrainian army, some allegedly let's say delivering some secret data to Ukrainians, to the Ukrainian government. For some days they stayed in the buildings which were captured by the militants. They were severely tortured. For example, Vyacheslav Bondarenko, if we are talking about, he has not recovered completely even now. Of course, all those charges were absurd. Just no proofs, no evidence of the espionage or the spying activities were presented, though the leaders of the militants publicly declared during the press conferences that the facts of the spy activities of our journalists have been proved, allegedly. Well, actually, there are no such facts. They couldn't possibly be there because all those people were doing what they have to do. I mean, they were involved in their professional activities. Well, actually, they appeared in a wrong time in the wrong place, and they didn't want the militants to transmit to the world. Well, the militants didn't want them to transmit the serious situation to the whole world. Similar cases were registered later as well. The journalists, they started to detain journalists for a longer period of time. They continued to subject the journalists to tortures. I can name here a high-profile case of, a well-known case of Dutsyk in Lugansk, almost 5 months he spent in detention. Not all of our journalists, unfortunately, when they were liberated, are prepared to talk about them. We know that some of them still keep silence, and they do not want to make their case public because the militants threaten their relatives and family members. One of the latest cases, Andriy mentioned that, is the case associated with illegal detention of Maria Varfolomeieva, a journalist. The free reporter publication and these media, we all actually watched and read her, let's say, her stories. She was always in the very core of all the situations. She was writing about the pro-Russian meetings near the terrorist captured buildings. She decided to stay in Lugansk because she could not, her 73-year-old sick granny could not leave Lugansk. She is immobilized, and there were no more relatives of hers there because both mother and father of Maria, they live in the foreign countries, and Maria stayed there. They continued to work as a freelancer and a fixer for several Ukrainian publications stationed in the so-called safe Ukrainian territories. On the 9th of January this year, Maria was detained just in the street while she was filming different buildings. She was also accused of spying for the Ukrainian army, for the right sector, for the Aidar battalion, that she was actually kind of repairing correcting the artillery fire, especially of the fact some of the attacks, during some of the attacks or bombardment on part of Ukrainians, which actually happened after she was detained. And in this case, the militants decided to become public in the media from the very beginning, in fact. Already 2 weeks after the detention of Maria, they publicly declared that Maria Varfolomeieva was a spy and was actually correcting the artillery fire. Later, they declared that her guilt was proven, and they were prepared to sentence her to 15 years of imprisonment. Several video films were published, carried by internet, allegedly showing the interrogation of Maria. But we know other cases when the militants forced journalists under the pressure, under the tortures, and promising them freedom or some kind of better conditions. They made them to give kind of pseudo testimonies or confessions on the film. I believe that this case, like Maria Varfolomeiva's one, remains not really well known to the majority of Ukrainian journalists, and the Ukrainian journalist community hasn't consolidated yet in order to try and help Maria and try to demand from the Ukrainian government to put to enter in their agenda the issue of liberating Maria Varfolomeieva, because as we can see in those cases when the Ukrainian government has such kind of political will, they can actually become successful in doing something similar, and they can actually help to liberate some of the hostages. Believe me, and that's it. Thank you, Konstantin. Ruslan Kharchenko has the floor, journalist of the TSN-Week. Actually, we would like to change format a bit. In fact, the case of Maria Varfolomeieva is extremely important. Today, during the presidential press conference, the journalists would like to raise this issue in order to bring much of it, maximum attention to this case. Also, I would like to draw attention to the major challenges faced by the journalist community regarding the freedom of speech this year. Traditionally, every year, we address the authorities, and we actually raise the agenda of media reform and major challenges. Today we are going to address not only the authorities but the journalists, the media, mass media. Last year they adopted the two key reforms. The public broadcasting, they canceled the protection of morale. Today we are expecting the political will for two more reforms: transparency of the media ownership and detatization, let's say, of the media space. Those are very important things. I would like to give the floor to Tatiana and Dutsyk from Telekritika, who is going to elaborate it on this issue. Well, indeed, we are approaching the day of journalists. We actually have, there are some things coincided. The year of a new president, the year of a new authorities. Today we are going to mark the Journalists' Day, and we are going to summarize what we have done in the media sphere and what challenges we face. And the monitoring and the Telekritika, which is our main activities, show the deterioration of the professionalism of our journalists, and we believe this to be one of the challenges or threats under the conditions Ukraine is living through. Oksana was absolutely right to say that we are going to deliver the message to the journalist community, because for the latter it is very important to work out the new rules and come to the agreement how we are going to continue our work in the future, because we cannot proceed in the same level further on. The same holds for our authorities, because our authorities make a series of mistakes trying to protect their sovereignty. We understand the challenges under the circumstances of this war, but we cannot embark on the road of the total prohibitions, let's say, and we believe that there are some stimuli for the self-regulation of the journalist environment. This is one of the most important things. We cannot even think about something when we are somebody on the top going to impose on us what to do. We raised repeatedly the topic of the oligarchization of the Ukrainian media space. Of course, this coincides with the messages voiced yesterday by the president, but we believe, we really wish that those messages not remain just messages, but lead to some practical steps. And also we would like to take care of the challenges faced by the journalists today. In other words, we encounter the whole set of comprehensive problems and challenges which we have to take to join our efforts to resolve those. We should, once again, I would like to repeat, we are against this policy of prohibition, and the authorities have to take care of what is going on in the information space. The authorities have to learn how to communicate, which they have not done yet. This, I mean, if we're talking about the Russian propaganda, we were writing about that. The authority has to understand, to learn how to communicate with the society, with the media, and with themselves. Unfortunately, those communications have not been built yet, which would correspond to those challenges we face today. One of the negative examples, which I can quote here, the same billboard in the eastern parts of Ukraine, when they call upon to reveal the local separatists. Actually, this only agitates the local population, doesn't bring any fruit. The authorities don't want to listen to the active public at large, which who are actually prepared to be involved in resolving the problems. Yeah, I would like to return to the topic, our round table, or this topic. Actually, I would like to give the floor to Ruslan Kharchenko, who worked together with Maria Varfolomeieva. Good afternoon. Over the period since the beginning of the warfare, I visited Lugansk, Donetsk, Krasny Luch for 6 times. And for the first time, I went to Lugansk and made acquaintance with the activists of the local Maidan, Andriy Shevchenko. And we actually were filming our own video. And then it so happened that 6 months later, I came back to Lugansk to prepare video, to film the conditions of life of the local population under the so-called local authorities. I needed some people who were like-minded persons and spiritually close to me, because I myself come from the Krasny Luch. From Krasny Luch, I didn't know Lugansk too well. I needed some persons who would really demonstrate to me and show to me what's going on in Lugansk. So Sasha, Alexander, introduced me to Maria Varfolomeieva. I already knew by that time that she was working for other mass media, and she said that they prepared the film or the story for the program Fed Up, Distala. And later she was actually giving me some, helping me not as journalist, but just as a person concerned. Actually, I've also filmed her grandmother, and she, you know this, what the situation was like in Lugansk in those days. Everything was very sad, you know. We had kind of consent that she would not appear on the screen in this story. Actually, we kept our promise, and she never appeared in that video. And then we continued our communication with her, and actually up to January, when she was imprisoned, I responded to all those messages or information which appeared in the publications and the mass media, with the so-called DPR, and continued to communicate with our common acquaintance Sasha Shevchenko, and I was asking about Maria, and he told me that this situation is under control, that Yuri Tandit, who actually is responsible for the exchange of the prisoners of war. But as we can see now, this problem hasn't been resolved yet. I mean, what is related to Maria Varfolomeieva. We are going to publish soon. We are going to publish a book, the war, TSN, whatever. So there will be a separate chapter based on my reminiscences about, Maria Varfolomeieva. I agree with what you said, what Konstantin mentioned, that we as a media community do not have a clear understanding why they did not raise that issue earlier, why this briefing didn't take place in February or March. all we can do today, just to draw attention of the people's concern to this issue, we tried to invite here the SBU representatives, but unfortunately they did not respond to our invitations. But we believe that after this briefing and this participation of so many persons from mass media, they will give more attention to that issue. Now I give the floor to Anton Krut, Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. I have a very short message. Thanks to our colleagues, we actually signed the statement regarding the appeal actually to liberate Maria Varfolomeieva. This appeal is open for signing. It was yesterday in the Amnesty International, the OSCE organization office. Starting next Monday, everybody who wishes to do that, they can actually become part of the signatories, to this appeal. We are going to contribute as much as we can to this situation. Radio Liberty, Oleksiy Matsuka. Good morning, esteemed colleagues. I would like to say that the very dangerous situation with the gathering and processing of information on the uncontrolled, as your mass media call it, territories. And this accounts for the fact that there is no such notion of independent journalism in those territories. Those people who call themselves the authorities, or as the goals of Ukraine writes, without any brackets, that this territory controlled by the DPR. No, in one of their publications they called it the populated area controlled by DPR, and I actually call upon my colleagues to use correct terminology regarding those territories, because since March 1 last year, we called Pavel Gubarev the people's governor, and the people actually believe that, because they just hear the facts which we have according to our standards without any kind of information we have to provide in our news messages, and people do not understand that. And yesterday during the meeting on Stop Censorship we were talking about that. We are going to call upon our colleagues to discuss more broadly this issue regarding the language we use while describing the situation in the occupied territories. But the most important, what we have to say, those cases with the battering of journalists, of the persecution of journalists, not only journalists, but those people who have some kind of alternative ideas or opinion different from the Kremlin propaganda, that those people do not have the right to remain on the occupied territory, so they come either here or to the Russian Federation, then come back. So this kind of self-censorship, and the language coming dating from the Soviet times in, let's say, 1930s, I would say. I can't remember that in the Soviet times they would try to poll the people, what's your attitude towards Stalin, for example, and so that the people, I can't even imagine, some people could answer, my attitude is very bad to Stalin. So we have to, when we trying to poll the people, we have to be very much attentive, try to explain to the people that this is something which is what's going on in totalitarian society, which does not reflect the situation properly. One of the journalists who worked in the Donetsk region, the militants put the bag on the on his head when he was just filming what's going on. Everybody was carrying mobile phones or iPhones, and he was one of those. And when he started to record using his phone some of the buildings, they noticed that. They brought him to Makivka, where he was in prison for 3 days, only for the fact he just produced his mobile phone or iPhone. Sometimes the carriers tell us when we deliver some of the things to that territory, the carrier said we cannot carry the TV cameras or whatever to that territory. We have to publish this kind of material in a permanent way. We have to provide the background for the people not to forget that the other idea, the other party coming to Minsk for the, let's say, agreements, was something who came to Donetsk and they removed the journalists or the Talis is over here, later we are guests here, we cannot work there because we face real physical threat or danger. I'm talking about the local journalists who used to work there for decades. And one more thing, tomorrow the Donbass Media Forum is going to start in the city of Kyiv. It's not going to be held in the city of Donetsk, the capital Donbass area, or in any other neighboring cities, because there is a danger on the part, or threat on the part of the, let's say, terrorist groupings, threat to the journalists who work in the territories which are close to the occupied territories. So we are going to hold this function in Kyiv to show the very graphic reflection of what's going on with the West media in the occupied territory. They're isolated. They cannot influence the Ukrainian level of indicators or the mass media indicators. That's why our public organization, the Donetsk Institute of Information, our colleagues, we are going to approach those rating agencies which actually determine the situation with the freedom of speech, so that they do not take into consideration the situation in Donetsk, because they do not have, and none of the 10 newspapers which were used to be published there, or let's say, they provide the publications which open under the so-called local king or authority. And again, we have to rivet our attention to this situation and provide a weekly audit of our materials and stories, how and what we are writing about. Upon this, the lives and the health of those people, those of our colleagues who remain in those territories and have tried to adjust to the local conditions. So this is going to have the media forum without any authority representatives to be present there. We decided to hold this ourselves, to gather the journalists from the Donbass area, what to do, how to gather and spread the information. And Maria Varfolomeieva is going to remain the focus of our attention, because this could happen to anybody, including the fixers or the journalists. Thank you. Taking into consideration this awful situation you and your colleagues described today, is there enough attention to this situation on the part of the profile international organizations like the Reporters Without Borders, CPJ? Well, this question addressed to all the experts. And do they do enough at the international level where there is a chance to draw attention to this issue? Thank you. I'm representative of Reporters Without Borders in Ukraine, so our organization repeatedly mentioned Maria Varfolomeieva, their statements and stories, and we have the representative of the protection organization, Rafat, you came here to listen, to hear about Varfolomeieva and the situation with the freedom of speech. I know the OSCE riveted much attention to this situation before, but the major problem is related to the negotiations and to the will of the both parties involved. A big question we have to put to the SBU, to the Ukrainian authorities. The same big question could be addressed to the opposite side. Thank you. I welcome everybody. I represent here independent media trade union of Ukraine. From the very first day we have been monitoring the situation associated with Maria Varfolomeieva. We repeatedly send the appeals, and we last appeal over to the international community to do everything possible for independent media trade union calls upon the Ukrainian authorities and the international community to to give more attention to the situation associated with Maria Varfolomeieva, who has been imprisoned for 5 months now, which can be allowed, and also the situation of the freedom of speech in Donetsk and Lugansk is awful, it's terrible. I would like to remind you that this situation started in the Crimea. I am the journalist who was forced to leave the Crimea. I would like to call upon you not to abandon, not to forget about this topic. Remember about that, and Maria Varfolomeieva actually needs our publications because we cannot forget such topic. Andriy, Kulikov, Public Radio. I have the question to Ganzha and to Shevchenko. What do you think? The attempts to bring this situation to this situation in the occupied territory, how it can be detrimental to the situation with the freedom of speech in Ukraine. I'm going to emphasize that those territories occupied remain to be the Ukrainian territories. And what happened there, in my opinion, that was the consequence of the development of the mass media in Ukraine, generally speaking. We have a brief answer. I believe that under the pretext of warfare, they actually try to curtail the freedom of speech in Ukraine. The authorities do not attend the press conferences. They do not, the authorities, I mean, did not explain their actions, do not give accounts of their actions. Instead of coming to the briefings, press conferences, well, actually, we are lucky to have the press conference, to have this press conference, Poroshenko today. Actually, the record of Yanukovych was 5 questions. If they are going to give us the same number of questions to be delivered, this figure will become the indicator of the situation with the freedom of speech in Ukraine and the transparency of Ukrainian authority. Taras, I understand we have to be laconic. Taras Shevchenko, Institute of Media Rights, Stops Censorship. Thank you for your question. In my opinion, the situation available today in the information space, both now and before, they affected the consequences for what we have today in our country. Occupation of the Crimea, actual occupation of the Donetsk region, of Donbass area, I mean. So actually that was detrimental to the interests of our country and provided very easy conditions for development of separatist sentiments, good conditions for the manipulation of the opinion of the citizens, good conditions for the people to believe certain stereotypes or paradigms, and thus this provided an opportunity to shift from the peaceful time to the wartime. I would like to say that one of the key things which can influence the situation in the media landscape is the public broadcasting, both radio and TV broadcasting. And over the last time, we have quite quality law prepared by some of our colleagues. This is a positive thing, but the reforms will be real reforms when they are implemented. We saw the law on prosecutor's office, the law on elections, the law on the anti-corruption bureau. Those are not enough. The laws must be implemented. When we are talking about the Journalists' Day, I would like to say that over the next year, up to the next 6th of June, both the state, the authorities, the journalists, and the society have to do everything possible that the law on the public broadcasting be implemented. Whatever we are talking about, the setting or establishing the legal entity, all those things must be absolutely completed and implemented. Ukraine Media Center, Chris, are there any negotiations regarding the liberation of Maria Varfolomeieva, if you know about that, and who's involved in those negotiations? Are there some special conditions or terms put forward by the militants? There was some information they wanted to exchange Maria for some kind of criminal. What do you know about that? What's the situation now? I'll try to answer a question. Well, in fact, I do not know one is this, the one stage are negotiations regarding the liberation of Maria. Today. Yes, indeed. Earlier, they demanded to liberate one of the criminals who committed the crime even before this conflict in the Eastern Ukraine started. Actually, he was already preliminary. Was in prison for 2 years by that time, However, for some time ago, the militants changed their demands, and what they demand for the liberation and who they would like to liberate in exchange for liberation of Maria, I don't know. So there are negotiations in place involving the public initiatives. SBU actually state that they too are involved in some negotiations to liberate Maria Varfolomeieva, but this is a kind of standardized response which have been here for several months now, and even before that, in regarding other cases of illegal detention of our citizens by militants. And I hope that SBU and the Ukrainian authorities are really involved today in active negotiations to liberate Maria. Ukrainian news. Actually, you answered my question, but just I need some specification after liberation of the public journalists. There was information. Maria said that nobody from SBU even had the contact with her. So either some kind of activities on part of the SBU with the liberated journalist. Thank you for your question. This is indeed a big problem associated not only with the liberated journalists, but generally speaking with the overwhelming majority of the hostages which were liberated from this kind of being captivity. We do not have any information about any activities of SB or some other law enforcement agencies. They do not investigate those cases, and they are kind of in suspended state. And this is again another big problem, and I cannot say you why this happens. I can tell you why. Shevchenko, Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. Just in continuation of the previous question, did you address any enforcement agencies with some kind of a letter or an address or appeal or whatever regarding the detained journalists? Did you approach, have you approached the SBU or the Ministry of Defense or the General Prosecutor's Office? And please speak into a microphone because we have the online transmission. Our organization can come up with an open statement. Official applications should be sent by the relatives of those persons. So maybe we can talk about some kind of joint letter or something like that. Okay. Do you know the exact number of journalists imprisoned by the so-called PR? Maria's, now only Maria. Last year, 79 journalists were imprisoned, and 35 of them more than 2 days. Yes, many journalists were taken as hostages for a long period of time, and now we have only one journalist. So today we can talk about this only one specific person. Do I understand you correctly? Yes? Okay. One more question regarding the freedom of speech. You mentioned that the journalists and the rights of the journalists are being kind of suppressed. We didn't say a bit suppressed, no. Okay, not a bit. Andriy actually anticipated my question. Is there some kind of representative research or study with some figures where we can acquaint ourselves with those figures, and who is taking care of that? The Institute of Mass Information, Mass Media, carries out the systematic research of the whole territory of Ukraine, including the temporarily occupied or next territory, where we can actually get this information. Today, with some hindrances. You were talking the situation somewhat improved as compared to the previous 6 months, because during the previous 6 months there were some kind of elections. Today we do not have any kind of political turmoil and the situation is more or less calm. But we actually can see some hindrances or barriers put in all the regions of Ukraine. We are talking about the level of freedom of speech at the level of 2011. First of all, one of the problems is the lack of punishment, or let's say we can remember the case when more than 300 journalists were battered and they actually they were badly injured, and we are trying to investigate this matter. And today the major, let's say, assaulters or attackers are the private persons who represent some kind of banks or district administrations. This is the major group of aggressors, but the problem remains there or stays, and we can see some of the factors which allows us to resolve this problem. One of the key factors here is non-preparedness of the journalist community to actively protect their rights and actively protect their right to profession. It's very important that the journalists per se, and that's why we are going to put this question to journalists, and tomorrow to stop censorship and other journalists. They're going to publish their appeal to all journalists in Ukraine. This I announced this, and I would like to emphasize that much depends upon us. Yes, it's very important to adopt the reforms, and political will must be there, and the guilty person must be punished. But the journalists must be proactive, not to repeat the situation of 2005 when the Yushchenko came to power, when everybody started to be commercialized. Now we have one just positive trend or tendency. For the first time ever, people come to us and ask to teach them how to write these stories based on the existing standards. They ask us, how should I write this story to be well balanced and to avoid some xenophobia or whatever. I do not want to do something similar to the Russian propaganda. Another problem is attitude to censorship or whatever. But this problem is associated with the fact that journalists do not know where is this kind of line in which they should not trespass, where they, on the one side of that is real journalist work, and on the other one, which stories could be detrimental to our profession. So we have to communicate with a broader space, not that we should not only discuss with our colleagues in mass media. This must be more broad communication, just to discuss what do we have to do under this condition of the information war, what the professional journalists, how they should act, where are the limits they should not let's say, excess. So this is really very important. That's why we address the journals and pay attention, special attention to our appeal and to mobilize and solidarize our efforts, because united we stand.
What's Ukraine's rating in the world on freedom of speech? 127 last year, because we have seven journalists died on the territory of Ukraine. And because of physical aggression, we have such a low place. I would like this year to be our situation to be improved, and the trends we observe, unfortunately, in media, they're quite negative. Just because journalist community doesn't understand, doesn't realize censorship. We have to explain what it is. One more comment. She mentioned the campaign of separatists. We can blame the government, but they have nothing to do with that campaign. That is in Ministry of Information. But they mentioned SBU and they involved some groups of volunteers from concrete regions. SBU is mentioned, and there is a phone number calling SBU. My question is why there was no rejection of SBU. It is SBU. These are details, but general picture consists of these details. I wanted to add to what Oksana told about concrete facts of pressure on freedom of speech. The issue of ownership of media and also transparency. The issue of oligarchy in media that is related to quality of information and also to quality of standards on the main channels went down, and we see how political position is in news is changing on different issues, on different channels, depending on to whom they belong. And what's his position? What the position of that owner? So nothing has changed, but the government must think how to change the situation. The issue of changes, amendments to the legislation in the context of transparency of media ownership, that's very important. Thank you, Diana. Is there any other question? Questions, journalists? No questions. Thank you very much. This is an official appeal to the government of Ukraine about the situation with Maria Varfolomeieva, and also we'll cover that. We'll continue covering that issue. Thank you.